brave Omega saved the dying wolf all feared. Fate revealed the Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Ella Parker stood in the heart of the forest, the chill of the evening air creeping into her bones. Her hands were trembling as she held the bundle of herbs she had picked just hours ago. Her heart, however, was steadier than ever. As an Omega, she had always been the weakest of her pack, dismissed by most, ignored by all, except for the few who saw her for who she really was, a healer, a caretaker. But tonight, in this moment, Ella felt more powerful than she ever had before. The wind rustled the leaves around her, and the sound of a distant howl sent a shiver down her spine. She had heard the rumors, the stories. The cursed wolf, the one everyone feared, had been spotted in these woods. But Ella wasn't afraid. There was a pull, a strange, unexplainable force drawing her deeper into the forest. She pushed forward, each step quickening as her curiosity grew stronger. Finally, she reached a clearing, and there, lying beneath the moonlight, was the creature everyone had spoken of, the dying wolf. Its fur was matted with blood, its breathing shallow and labored. Ella's heart raced as she knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she gently touched its side. She could feel the warmth of its body, yet the power that once radiated from it was fading fast. As Ella worked to tend to its wounds, she could sense something more beneath the surface. This wasn't just any wolf. This was someone, far more than she could have ever imagined. But she didn't let herself be afraid. She was a healer, and it was her job to save lives, no matter whose life it was. The hours passed as Ella worked tirelessly, carefully cleaning and dressing the wounds, whispering soft words of comfort to the creature before her. She could feel its strength beginning to return, the steady rhythm of its heart slowly coming back to life. But then, something incredible happened. As she gently touched the wolf's fur one last time, its form began to shift. The fur melted away, and in its place stood a man, tall, strong, and with eyes the color of a stormy sky. Ella gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. The man before her was no ordinary man. He was the Alpha King, Damian Blackwood, a figure from the legends, the one who had ruled over the Northern Territories for years. And he had been there all along, hidden in the form of a wolf. Damian's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. He rose to his feet, towering over her, and with a low, commanding voice, he spoke. "You saved me," he said, his voice hoarse from the transformation. "I owe you my life." Ella, still in shock, could only nod, her mind racing to process what had just happened. But in that moment, as the Alpha King stood before her, something inside her stirred. Fate had brought them together, and their lives would never be the same. As Ella stood there, her eyes locked with the man now standing before her, the realization of who he was began to settle in. The Alpha King, Damian Blackwood, was no longer a distant figure of legends, but someone real, standing right in front of her. His powerful presence filled the clearing, the air around him seeming to thrum with an energy she had never felt before. Ella's heart raced, a mixture of awe and uncertainty swirling inside her. She had just saved the Alpha King, a man who was feared by all, but she had no idea what this moment meant for her future. His eyes, still glowing faintly with the remnants of his wolf form, studied her with a curiosity that made her feel as though he were seeing right through her. Damian took a step toward her, his movements slow, almost as if he were testing the ground beneath him. Ella instinctively took a small step back, her body tense, but her feet rooted to the ground. "Why did you help me?" Damian asked, his voice low, rough from the transformation. "Why save someone like me?" Ella hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice steady but soft. "Because you needed help. No one should suffer alone, no matter who they are." Damian's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, though the weight of his gaze never wavered. He was a king, a leader, and yet, there was something vulnerable about him now, something raw and real. "You are not like others," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Most would run from me, afraid of what I've become. Ella shook her head gently, not breaking eye contact. I've learned not to fear things I don't understand, she said quietly. And I don't believe you're as monstrous as everyone says. Damien studied her for a moment, the silence stretching between them like a thick fog. Finally, he spoke again, his tone more serious. You are brave, Omega. Braver than most, I think. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Ella's heart fluttered at his words, though she quickly pushed aside the flutter of emotions. She couldn't let herself get caught up in the complexities of this moment. You don't owe me anything. I only did what I felt was right. Damien stepped even closer, now just a few feet away from her. She could feel the heat radiating off his body, his presence overwhelming in the most surprising way. Your kindness has saved me, Ella, he said, his voice softer now, yet still commanding. I've been alone for far too long, hidden away, but you've given me a reason to hope again. Ella took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions rising within her. She had never imagined her life would take this turn. From the moment she had seen the wolf, she knew something was different. But this connection to the Alpha King? It was beyond anything she could have expected. As Damien looked down at her, his intense gaze softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. It was small, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat. You saved me, he repeated, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. And now, I will save you. Ella didn't know what he meant by that, but before she could ask, Damien stepped back and bowed his head slightly. You have no idea what you've done, Ella. You've not only healed my wounds, but you've healed a part of me that I thought was lost forever. Ella felt a mixture of confusion and curiosity. What was he talking about? She had only done what anyone with a heart would have done. Yet, she knew there was more to this than she could understand. I don't need saving, she said softly, though the words felt different now. Damien chuckled, a low, almost melancholic sound. We all need saving, Ella, whether we realize it or not. He straightened, his eyes never leaving hers. And I will not let you go now. Not after you've saved me. Ella blinked in surprise, unsure of how to respond. She had never thought much about the Alpha King or his intentions before tonight. But now, with his words echoing in her mind, she realized how much had changed in such a short time. She didn't know what the future held, but something inside her whispered that her life would never be the same again. The fate of a king and the heart of an Omega had collided in this forest, and there was no going back. Damien's presence loomed over Ella as the weight of his words lingered in the air. She could still feel the tremble in her hands from the intensity of what had just transpired. The Alpha King, Damien Blackwood, was standing before her, a man who commanded the respect and fear of entire territories. Yet here he was, offering his gratitude to her. A simple Omega, someone no one had ever truly valued. Ella didn't know what to make of it. She had always been the one to heal the wounds of others, to tend to the needs of her pack, but this was different. She had saved someone far more powerful than anyone could imagine, and yet, all she could do was stand there in shock. You must have many questions, Damien said after a long pause, his deep voice breaking the silence between them. Ella blinked, still trying to wrap her mind around the reality of the situation. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. That is the question, isn't it? He said softly. What happens now is that I owe you my life, Ella, and I will not let that debt go unpaid. Ella's heart skipped a beat. The weight of his words settled on her like a heavy cloak, and she felt her pulse quicken. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that she would be the one saving the Alpha King, let alone have him vow to repay her. But Damien wasn't like the other alphas she had known. He wasn't cruel or indifferent. There was something more in his gaze, something that drew her in, even though she didn't fully understand it yet. I don't need anything from you, Ella said, her voice shaking slightly as she took a step back. I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Damien's eyes softened as he took a step toward her. You saved me, not just from death, but from something much worse. I've been lost for so long, Ella. Alone. I've built walls around myself, walls that no one has ever been able to break down. Until you. His words were quiet, but filled with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. Ella swallowed, her throat dry. She had always been told she was nothing more than a broken omega, someone weak, someone who could never do anything important. But standing here, facing Damien Blackwood, she felt something stir within her, a quiet strength she never knew she had. "You don't owe me anything," Ella repeated, her voice steadying. "I didn't do this for you, or for anyone else. I did it because I couldn't just leave you to die." Damien nodded, his expression unreadable. He seemed to be contemplating her words, as though weighing something heavy in his mind. Then, without warning, he reached out, his hand hovering near her arm. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his voice low and serious. "I know you're not like the others. You have a power, a gift, and I need someone like you by my side. You've already proven you're capable of more than anyone could ever imagine." Ella's breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand what he meant by a gift, but the way he spoke made her wonder if this was more than just gratitude. "What are you asking?" she asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. Damien stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I'm asking you to stay with me, Ella, to help me heal not just from this curse, but from everything I've become. Together, we can fix what's broken." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise, but also uncertainty. Ella felt her heart race as the weight of his request settled on her. She wasn't sure what he was asking of her, or even if she could trust him. But in that moment, with the Alpha King standing before her, offering his future, something deep inside her stirred. Maybe, just maybe, she could help him. Maybe, just maybe, she could help herself too. "I don't know what to say," Ella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just me. I'm not someone special." Damien's gaze softened as he looked down at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're more special than you realize," he said quietly. "And I'm not giving up on you, Ella. I'm not giving up on us." Ella felt a warmth spread through her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was hope. It was a feeling she wasn't sure she could trust, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in it. She had saved him, and now, for reasons unknown to her, it seemed that fate had brought them together for a purpose. Whatever that purpose was, she wasn't sure. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life was no longer just about surviving. It was about something much more. Something bigger. Something that had only just begun. As the days passed, Ella found herself unable to shake the feeling that her life had shifted in ways she could never have imagined. Damien had kept his promise. He had stayed by her side, guiding her through the complexities of his world. And in return, Ella did her best to help him understand the peace he had long since abandoned. He was a king, burdened by more than just his title. Every step they took together seemed to uncover more of his pain, more of the struggles he had kept hidden for so long. They had spent countless hours walking through the ancient halls of his castle, discussing matters of the kingdom, the curses that had plagued him, and the quiet weight of responsibility he bore on his shoulders. Damien had asked for her help, but as the days wore on, it became clear that Ella was not just helping him. She was becoming his anchor, the steady force that he had desperately needed. In turn, Damien showed her a world she had never imagined, a life beyond the constraints of her pack and the expectations placed on her. He showed her the intricacies of ruling, the delicate balance between strength and compassion that a leader must possess. And with every passing day, Ella found herself falling deeper into the reality of who Damien was, a man shaped by the harsh realities of his world, yet still holding on to a part of him that longed for more. "You don't have to stay," Damien said one evening as they sat beneath the stars, the soft glow of the moon reflecting off the lake before them. "I understand if you want to return to your life. There is nothing keeping you here but your kindness, and you owe me nothing." Ella's heart clenched at the words. She had been given the choice to leave, to go back to the life she had known, but she couldn't imagine herself walking away from Damien now. He had shown her a life full of challenges, yes, but also hope, a hope she hadn't realized she was missing. "I don't want to leave," Ella said, her voice steady, though her heart raced in her chest. "You saved me, Damien. You gave me a chance to be something more than just the omega everyone overlooked." Damien's eyes softened at her words, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. "You are more than anyone has ever given you credit for," he said quietly, his hand reaching for hers. "I'm not the only one who has been changed by this." Ella turned to face him, her breath catching in her throat. He was right. She had never imagined herself standing here, in this place, with him. A king, someone who had once seemed so far out of reach, had become someone she could trust, someone she could rely on. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure where her path would lead, but she knew she didn't want to walk it alone. As the weeks turned into months, Ella's bond with Damien only deepened. They grew closer, their conversations becoming more than just strategy and healing. They shared pieces of themselves that no one else had ever seen. Their hopes, their fears, their dreams. Damien confided in her about the struggles of his reign, the loneliness he had faced as a ruler with no one to truly trust. And Ella, in turn, opened up about her past, the years spent feeling like she was invisible to everyone around her. Together, they found a connection neither of them had expected. It wasn't just the love of a king and his omega. It was something far more profound. They were equals in a world that had never allowed them to be. "I don't know what the future holds," Damien said one evening as they stood together in the garden, watching the sunset. "But I know this. I can't face it without you." Ella smiled, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't known she could feel. "And I won't let you face it alone," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. The journey they had started together had only just begun, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ella knew that whatever challenges they would face in the future, they would face them side by side. The bond between them was unbreakable, and together, they would forge a future neither of them had ever thought possible. As the seasons changed, Ella and Damien found themselves facing challenges they hadn't anticipated. The castle, once silent and filled with the weight of unspoken rules, had become a place of warmth and growth. Their bond had deepened, and though they had yet to speak of it openly, there was no denying the connection that had formed between them. It wasn't just the shared moments of healing or the countless hours spent learning about each other's pasts. It was more than that. They were beginning to change one another, in ways both profound and subtle. One morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the tall windows of the castle, Damien stood by the fireplace, looking out at the world beyond. Ella, now accustomed to the quiet moments they shared, approached him, a soft smile on her lips. "You've been up since before dawn again," she said softly. "I couldn't sleep," Damien replied, his voice deep with thought. "There's so much at stake, Ella. More than just the kingdom. More than just my people." Ella stood beside him, her eyes following the path his gaze traced toward the distant hills. "What are you afraid of?" she asked, her tone gentle. Damien turned to her, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, he seemed to hesitate. "I'm afraid of losing you," he confessed, the vulnerability in his voice taking Ella by surprise. She had always seen Damien as strong, a leader who held his emotions in check, but here, in this moment, he was showing her a side of him he had never revealed before. The Alpha King, a man feared by many, was opening himself to her in a way she hadn't expected. "You won't lose me," Ella replied, her voice steady. "Not unless you push me away." The words hung between them, and for a moment, Damien seemed to consider them carefully. Then, he reached for her hand, his touch warm against her skin. "I don't want to push you away," he said quietly. "But the world we live in, it's dangerous. I'm not the man I used to be. I don't know if I can protect you from it all." Ella squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "You don't have to protect me from everything," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I'm not fragile. I've seen my share of hardship, and I've learned how to face it. But we face it together, Damien. That's what matters." He looked at her, his expression softening, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Together," he repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes," Ella said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "We are stronger together." Over the next few days, Damien and Ella worked side by side, not just as ruler and healer, but as partners. Damien began to share more of the burdens that had weighed him down for so long, and Ella, in turn, shared her insights, her strength, and her unwavering belief that they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. Their relationship, once defined by a quiet understanding, had blossomed into something deeper, something built on trust, respect, and a shared desire for a future where both of them could be more than just their titles. As the full moon approached, marking another year of Damien's rule, the weight of the future seemed to hang in the air. There were still dangers looming on the horizon, both within and outside the kingdom. But Ella knew that together, they could face whatever came their way. One evening, as they stood at the edge of the castle grounds, looking out at the vast expanse of land that Damien had sworn to protect, Ella turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet certainty. "No matter what happens, we will face it together," she said softly. Damien met her gaze, his eyes filled with gratitude, and something else, something she couldn't quite name. "Together," he echoed. And in that moment, as the moonlight bathed them both in its soft glow, Ella realized that this was the beginning of something new, a future they would build together, no matter the obstacles they might face. The days following their conversation felt like a turning point for both Ella and Damien. There was a new understanding between them, a deep connection that neither had expected. Ella's presence seemed to anchor Damien, and his strength gave her the courage she never knew she had. They began to make plans, not just for the kingdom, but for a future they would build together. Damien, though still burdened by the weight of his crown, began to share more with Ella. It was as if the walls he had spent so many years building were slowly crumbling, and for the first time, he allowed himself to lean on someone else. Ella, in turn, found herself stepping into a role she had never imagined for herself. She had always been the quiet healer, the one who stayed in the background, unnoticed. But with Damien by her side, she was beginning to see her true worth. She wasn't just an Omega, a healer, or someone people overlooked. She was someone who could change the course of their future. As they walked through the castle one evening, Damien turned to her, his face serious yet soft with a look she had come to cherish. "Ella," he began, his voice low and thoughtful, "there are things I've been keeping from you. Not because I don't trust you, but because I've been afraid." Ella looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Afraid of what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "Afraid of letting you in," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Afraid of what might happen if you saw all of me. The broken parts, the parts I've buried. I thought if I kept you at a distance, I could protect you from the darkness that follows me." Ella's heart swelled with compassion, and she gently cupped his face in her hands. "You don't have to protect me from anything, Damien," she said softly. "I want to see all of you, the light and the dark. Because I'm here for you. I always will be." Damien's eyes softened, and for a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed her gently. It was a soft kiss, filled with years of longing, uncertainty, and finally, acceptance. When they broke apart, Damien's eyes were filled with something new, hope. "I've never known peace, Ella," he said quietly. "But when I'm with you, I feel it. I feel like, maybe, I can find my way back." Ella smiled, her heart full. "We'll find our way together," she whispered. The next few weeks were a blur of plans and preparations, both for the kingdom and their future. Damien's trust in Ella grew deeper, and he began to share the responsibilities of ruling with her. She had always been a healer, but now, she was becoming a leader in her own right. Together, they worked to strengthen the kingdom, forging alliances and making decisions that would shape the future. The more they worked together, the stronger their bond became. Damien's kingdom, once filled with shadows and uncertainty, was beginning to flourish under their shared vision. And through it all, Ella stood by his side, not just as a healer, but as his equal, his partner. As the months passed, Ella and Damien's relationship continued to deepen, and the kingdom began to heal, just as they had. The future was still uncertain, but they knew one thing for sure. Whatever came their way, they would face it together. Their love had become a force stronger than any curse or challenge. And for the first time in a long time, Damien felt something he hadn't in years, hope. Hope for the future. Hope for a life filled with love, purpose, and the promise of something better. Together, they had built a new future, one that was filled with light, and the darkness that once surrounded them began to fade away. As the seasons continued to shift, Ella and Damien found themselves increasingly wrapped up in the world they were building together. The kingdom was thriving under their leadership, and their bond, once fragile and uncertain, had solidified into something unbreakable. The days had become a blur of decisions, strategies, and shared moments of quiet reflection. But it was one evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, that the weight of everything truly settled on them both. The evening air was crisp, and the scent of blooming flowers mixed with the earthiness of the surrounding woods. The moon hung high in the sky, its soft glow illuminating the path ahead. As they strolled side by side, Damien turned to Ella, his expression serious, yet filled with a quiet intensity. "Ella," he began, his voice low and steady, "there is something I need to discuss with you." Ella glanced at him, her heart instantly picking up its pace. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft but attentive. Damien took a deep breath, his gaze lingering on the horizon before turning back to her. "There are still those who do not trust me, Ella. They see the changes we've made, the progress we've achieved, and they fear it. Fear of losing control. Fear of what our future could mean for them." Ella's heart sank. She had known there would be challenges, but hearing Damien voice his concerns so openly made the reality of their situation feel even more pressing. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Damien stopped walking, turning to face her fully. He took both of her hands in his, the warmth of his touch grounding her. "I need you by my side, now more than ever," he said, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "I cannot do this without you." Ella felt a surge of emotions, pride, love, and determination. She had always known she was meant for something more than simply surviving. But standing here with Damien, she realized just how much they truly depended on one another. "I'm with you always," she replied, her voice steady and unwavering. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together. You don't have to do this alone." Damien's eyes softened, and a small, grateful smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You are my strength, Ella," he said quietly. "Without you, I don't know where I'd be." The words, simple as they were, filled Ella's heart with warmth. She had never imagined herself in this position, standing alongside a man as powerful as Damien, but here she was, his equal, his partner. "We've come so far," Ella said, her gaze drifting to the moonlit horizon. "But we still have so much more to do." Damien nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, but we'll do it together. And together, we'll build something that lasts." The promise in his voice was undeniable, and in that moment, Ella realized that this was their true beginning. Their love, their partnership, wasn't just about healing the kingdom. It was about healing each other, building a future neither of them had ever dreamed possible. As they stood there, hand in hand, the weight of their responsibilities seemed a little less heavy. They were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead because they knew they had each other. And in a world that often seemed dark and uncertain, that was enough. Together, they would face the future side by side and create the world they had always longed for, a world built on trust, love, and the belief that anything was possible as long as they were together. The weeks that followed were filled with a sense of anticipation and quiet determination. Ella and Damien had grown even closer, their bond strengthening with each passing day. The kingdom continued to flourish under their leadership, but with every new achievement, the weight of their responsibility grew heavier. They knew that their success had made them vulnerable to those who sought to take advantage of their growing influence. One evening, as they sat in the grand hall, discussing matters of the kingdom, Damien paused, his gaze distant. "There's something we need to address," he said, his voice serious. Ella looked at him, sensing the shift in his tone. "What is it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Damien's brow furrowed as he stood, walking toward the window that overlooked the vast expanse of land. "There are whispers, Ella," he said quietly. "Whispers about us. About our rule. Some are not happy with the changes we've made." Ella's heart tightened at his words. She had known that their progress would not be without opposition, but hearing it from Damien made the reality of it feel more immediate. "Whispers from whom?" she asked, standing to join him by the window. Damien turned to her, his expression filled with a mix of frustration and resolve. "From the nobility, from those who were once in power. They fear what we are building, fear that we are taking away their control." Ella nodded, her thoughts racing. "They'll try to stop us," she said, more to herself than to Damien. "They'll fight us every step of the way." Damien's gaze softened as he looked at her, his hand reaching out to gently grasp hers. "We knew this would come," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But we're not backing down. We're not going to let fear dictate our future." Ella's heart swelled at his words. She had always known that Damien was a man of conviction, but hearing him speak with such determination gave her the strength to believe in their cause even more. "We'll fight for what we've built," she said, her voice steady. "Together." Damien smiled, his expression softening. "Yes, together." The days that followed were filled with strategic meetings, negotiations, and planning. Ella and Damien worked side by side, strengthening their alliances and preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. They knew the path forward would not be easy, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. As the sun began to set one evening, casting a golden glow across the castle grounds, Ella found herself standing at the edge of the balcony, looking out at the horizon. The weight of everything, the kingdom, the future, their relationship, felt heavy in the stillness of the evening. Damien joined her, standing quietly by her side. For a moment, they simply watched the world around them, the silence between them comfortable and filled with understanding. "I never thought I'd be here," Ella said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Standing here, by your side, fighting for something bigger than myself." Damien's eyes softened as he turned to her, his hand gently brushing against hers. "You were always meant to be here, Ella," he said quietly. "You're not just by my side. You are my equal. And together, we will make this kingdom the place it was always meant to be." Ella looked up at him, her heart full of emotions she hadn't known she could feel. In that moment, she realized that they had already built something incredible, something strong enough to withstand whatever challenges would come their way. And as they stood together, side by side, Ella knew that the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. Whatever came next, they would face it together, united in their purpose and their love. The days that followed their quiet conversation brought a new sense of clarity to Ella and Damien. The kingdom, once teetering on the edge of chaos, was beginning to stabilize under their combined efforts. With each challenge, they grew stronger, and the trust between them deepened. But the threats they had feared were not gone. They were still very much present. One evening, as they sat in the war room, a map spread out before them, Damien's expression was grim. "The nobles are moving against us," he said, his finger tracing a line on the map. "They're not happy with how things have shifted. There's talk of rebellion, of siding with outside forces to challenge my rule." Ella felt the weight of his words. She had known it would come to this, but hearing it made the reality of their situation more pressing. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Damien's eyes met hers, his expression resolute. "We stand our ground. We cannot let them dictate the future we are building. But we also need to ensure we have the support of those who believe in our vision." Ella nodded, her heart swelling with pride at his determination. She had never imagined herself in this role, by the side of a king, fighting not just for survival, but for a future she had once thought impossible. "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with resolve. Damien's gaze softened as he looked at her. "Everything," he said simply. "I need you by my side, now more than ever. We're stronger together. You've become more than just my partner, Ella. You are the heart of this kingdom." Ella felt a rush of warmth at his words, but also a deep sense of responsibility. She had always been a healer, someone who fixed what was broken. But now, she realized, she wasn't just healing the wounds of the kingdom. She was helping to shape its future. "Then we'll fight for it," she said, her voice unwavering. "We'll stand together and protect everything we've built." The following days were filled with strategy and planning. Ella and Damien met with their most trusted allies, securing support and preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but through it all, they stood united. One evening, as they stood together on the castle balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Ella turned to Damien, her heart full. "You were right," she said softly. "We are stronger together." Damien smiled, his eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. "We always have been," he said quietly. Ella smiled back, feeling the weight of the world lift, just a little, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Ella and Damien stood together, not just as ruler and healer, but as equals, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, They would build the kingdom they had always dreamed of.